So, the D-Day landings happened on the 6th of June 1944, and I've found here a copy of the News Review from the 15th of June 1944, so just over a week after it happened. And there's an article in it about how the press dealt with it, you know, the news bulletins as they came out on the day, and it's a great insight into how it must have felt to have been living through it. So it's titled, "A Time for Courage, but Not Yet for Joy." The news of the invasion came over the air at 9:30 a.m. But by lunchtime, the midday papers were out. "The invasion of Europe begins," streamed the Evening Standard. The Evening News said, "Allies invade France," and the Star just said, "We invade." There had been rumours. All night long, a host of warplanes had been droning over southern England. Many a Briton turned over in bed and grunted, "Sounds as though it started." But when he rose and switched on the BBC 7 o'clock news and heard nothing, he dismissed the idea as he had countless times before. Later risers were luckier. The 8 a.m. bulletin mentioned Berlin reports that Allied parachutists had landed near the mouth of the Seine in Normandy, that the British warships were shelling the coast. It was still rumour everywhere except in the map-festooned Macmillan Hall of Bloomsbury's Ministry of Information, where at 4 a.m. that morning, overalled workers had set up 25 deal tables. War correspondents, warned days before to remain within an hour's call, had been roused to take a telephone message about 6:15. "Will you please come to Macmillan Hall as quickly as possible?" This was it. By 7 o'clock, about 40 correspondents had arrived at the ministry to find the brown double-swing doors with their slit glass peepholes heavily guarded by military police. They were told they would be locked in until the first communiqué was issued. Inside, they were fed with background materials and talks by specialists. In neat piles set out on the trestle tables were handouts totalling 60,000 words. This was a press conference, but everybody was in uniform. Some of the correspondents sat at brand new typewriters and wrote preliminary stories. In a small room leading off Macmillan Hall, normally the press library, censors worked to pass these stories for release when the button was pressed. Others drank cups of tea and coffee, ate pre-breakfast snacks. If they left the hall, correspondents were allowed to do so only under military escort. Women military police were on duty to escort the handful of women war correspondents. Significant in a room famous for its great war maps was the absence of a map of Europe. At 9:25, an officer on the platform was talking generally about the difficulties of organising and timing an invasion. Europe was more difficult than North Africa or Sicily or Italy. There was a 20-foot rise and fall in the tide in the English Channel. Reefs outside some of the selected spots on the French coast needed a certain depth of water for the boats to ride to the beaches. The clock's hands hovered between 9:29 and 9:30. In slipped an orderly with a signal chit. An officer sprang up, interrupted the speaker, took up a stopwatch and said, "In 5 seconds the communiqué is going out to the world. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you may go." As they dashed out, ABSI, the broadcasting station in Europe, cut into its programme with the invasion flash. The following communiqué has been issued from Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force. Then came communiqué number 1. Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France. And then we have our title, "No Mafe Kings." Now this is Mafe Kings. This is a reference from the Boer War, and what it basically means is there are no massive national patriotic celebrations at this point. I mean, it's worth bearing in mind that for us, you know, the D-Day landings, we now know with hindsight that the D-Day landings marked the beginning of the end of the Second World War and the beginning of victory in Europe. But it probably didn't feel like that on the day. In fact, from this article, it's really clear it didn't feel like that on the day. So, no Mafe Kings. It was the biggest news of the war, but it came as an anticlimax to 4 bleak years of waiting. There were no horse-throated crowds in Trafalgar Square, no cheering thongs outside Buckingham Palace, no Mafe Kings. The people of Great Britain accepted the news soberly. Bitter experience had burned one fact deeply in their minds. The German was a ferocious, resourceful, crafty foe who would not easily be overcome. And so the news came like a clap of thunder presaging the gathering storm. This was only the beginning. Soon would come the deluge. No one knew how long it would last. No one knew how many men would not come back. In a suburban train steaming out of Liverpool Street on the evening of D-Day sat a young Australian WAAF, so that's the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, a strapping, dark-haired wench with a wedding ring on her finger. She opened her newspaper and began to sob quietly behind it. Her man had gone. I'm finding it really difficult to read this, you know. This is not a drama. This is not some American film. This is written 7 days after it actually happened. You know, it's real. This is real. The other passengers pretended not to notice her tears. They peered out of windows and talked and read. They understood. The nation understood. This was a time of courage, not yet the time for joy. If you like this content, please take a look at my channel, Not History But News, where I'm going through a big box full of old newspapers that I found in an attic, and they're full of things like this. So please take a look, and if you enjoy it, please like and subscribe. Thank you.